Ahead of the start of Denver Broncos training camp, who are the X factors on offense, on defense, and on special teams? We're going to share our thoughts. We want you to share yours as well, and you'll get all that on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Who are the X factors for this Denver Broncos football team ahead of training camp on offense, on defense, on special teams? That's the theme of today's episode of the show. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Special shout out to all the everydayers out there as well. Make sure you subscribe or you follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, my good friend, Sayre Bedinger. He's the site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends, LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're getting closer, Sayre. This is the week we officially kick off our position training camp previews where we look at position depth. We look at maybe position battles to watch. But before we get to the exciting part that will lead us directly into training camp, we've got a couple more themes we're going to talk about this week, and that is really looking at your biggest X factors for this team going into the season on offense, on defense, and on special teams. Let's start off with the offensive side of the ball. I'll let you kick things off here. For you, Sayre, who is your biggest X factor for the Broncos offense this upcoming season?
Well, I think there's a lot of them this year, which is really an awesome opportunity for so many guys to step up. You really need that unit to take a huge leap forward. But one guy that I'm looking at in particular, Cody, for this year to be an X factor is Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver. And obviously, we know what he can bring to the table. We saw him make the Pro Bowl in 2019 when he was just out there dominating at the catch point, really making a lot of tough catches for the Broncos, doing some stuff after the catch. Then obviously the really unfortunate injury there in 2020 when kind of everyone expected him to take that leap into the upper echelon of NFL wide receivers. Like he was on that same trajectory at that point as a lot of those other big name guys in the league that came in around 2018, 2019. Like by 2020, he was expected to be up among the best of the best, and unfortunately suffers the knee injury on the interception return against Pittsburgh. Then, of course, coming back in 2021, it was just a tough year for everybody, right? It was a tough year for the whole offense. Then last season, I think it was just, once again, a cluster. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And I think we saw Courtland doing a really great job outside of maybe the fact that he wasn't catching as many passes as he did in 2019 wasn't necessarily the point. Like we saw him out there running good routes. We saw him out there doing some explosive things, clocking in at over 21 miles per hour on the GPS. Like the explosiveness is there. The route running is there. There was a couple drops last season, a couple opportunities that he missed that I think he would love to have had back. And maybe some of his best plays, Cody, that didn't even count because there was a penalty called either against him or penalty call against the other team. I think this is the year right here where we see, hey, the rubber's going to meet the road for Courtland Sutton. Can he truly be that X factor to push this offense over the top? Because we assume Jerry Jeudy's going to produce. We assume Greg Dulcich is going to produce. What are you getting out of Courtland Sutton? I think that's the X factor for this Broncos offense.
I like that point that you made there, and I think Courtland is a great example of being an X factor. And I'm sure some people are going to say, what about Jerry Jeudy? What about Dulcich? I think all those guys can be X factors, but we're talking about maybe a foundational piece of who can be the big contributor in big time moments, right? We all think that Jerry Jeudy is going to be the one player who really explodes in this year's offense for Sean Payton. We hope that's the case, right? But you still need to get contributions. And Courtland Sutton, with his size, with what we've seen before from him, Sayre, I mean, he fits the bill for what an X factor can be. I like that pick. Broncos Country, make sure as you're watching along on YouTube, you share your thoughts in the comment section as well, who you think your X factor on offense is. We'd love to hear from it. I'm going to go with Russell Wilson this upcoming season. Now, ESPN also chose Russell Wilson as the Broncos' biggest X factor, and I think it kind of alludes to the fact that not necessarily that he is, but I think that you need him to be. And look, we've talked about Russell Wilson the last couple of episodes here on the show. We're going to talk about him this week as we preview the quarterback position going into training camp, but more so why I think Russell Wilson needs to be the Broncos' biggest X factor. As we've seen, you have to have that quarterback effect. I mean, look at Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. Look at Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. Look at Buffalo with Josh Allen. The Chargers with Justin Herbert. Russ needs to get back into that conversation, and I think he will this year. I truly do under Sean Payton, and I think a structure and a system around him that actually benefits what he does well as a football player, what he does as a quarterback. I think he will emerge into the Broncos' biggest X factor, and ideally your quarterback, you need him to operate. Because look, if you have an X factor like Cortland Sutton or let's say Greg Dulcich or Jerry Jeudy, if they're your X factor, you need someone to get them the ball, which then in turn I think makes them an X factor as well, because they can't be as productive as they can without a quarterback throwing them accurate passes. Look, we can go back to the long list of quarterbacks Denver has had at the position since Peyton Manning retired. And there's been talent at the wide receiver position, but there hasn't been consistency in terms of guys who can consistently get them the ball in big moments, make those big plays that you need them to make. And I think that's really where my point kind of lies here with Russell Wilson. He needs to be that guy this year for the Broncos. I'm excited to see if he turns it around. I think there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of optimism right now in Broncos country that he will be a much better version than what we've seen from him in 2022, and maybe getting back to that 2020 Russ that threw over 40 touchdowns in that season. He's my X factor here, but I wanted to talk about one that Broncos country has brought up, an honorable mention on today's episode of the show as an X factor, Javonte Williams. And this is an interesting one, right? Considering he's coming off of the injury. He held a football camp over the weekend with Patrick Surtain, and he told local media that he anticipates he's going to be fully ready to go. He expects to be fully cleared by the start of training camp, which is big news if true. And he said, hey, he still plans on running with violent intentions. How does that make you feel? I mean, obviously, as you hear that from Javonte over the weekend.
It's so great to hear, isn't it? You just you want him to be brimming with confidence as you get to training camp. That's absolutely, you know this, Cody, being that you've had a major knee injury and reconstructive surgery, right? You know what it's like to have to, regain that confidence to go out there and make those cuts, to change direction, to even put a ton of pressure on it, or to just go take a hit. All those different things factor in. So if Javonte's brimming with confidence, look, I am very excited for him. I don't think my brain has fully wrapped around the idea of the Broncos offense in 2023 with fully healthy Javonte Williams yet, which it seems weird because we got a fully healthy Javonte in 2021. We know what he's capable of. It's just been so hard for me to insert that into the expectations this year, given what we know happened last year. And so I'm excited for my own expectations to be reset. And I'm sure many who have been kind of thinking along the same lines as me are excited to do the same.
On Broncos country, make sure as you're watching this on YouTube, you subscribe or follow. As we approach 10K subscribers there, we are close. Help us bridge the gap by the time training camp approaches here. We're going to continue this conversation on today's episode of the show. As always, if you're listening wherever you get your podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment or you tweet us on social media at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos, who your Broncos offensive X factor this season will be. We're curious for your thoughts as well, but the conversation continues as we shift our focus to the defensive side of the ball. Who are the Broncos defense's biggest X factors this season, in my opinion, or Sayre's opinion, or even your opinion in Broncos country? You'll get that on today's episode of the show. This episode is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And it's easy to create a job post in minutes over there at LinkedIn Jobs. You create it, fill out the parameters of what you want, and then it publishes immediately to your network. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread word that you're hiring. And they have simple tools like screening questions, which make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So make sure you continue your year strong with the right team member for you and your job. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, we talked about the X factors on offense in 2023 for the Denver Broncos, and now we're going to shift gears to the defensive side of the ball. But before we do, from Cody and I, we just want to say thank you to all of you everyday listeners of Locked On Broncos. And for those of you listening for the first time, thank you for joining us today, whether you're watching on YouTube from the couch or maybe you're listening to the podcast. Cody, I just ran into somebody who was listening to a podcast walking through Costco. So if you're listening at Costco with us, thank you for being with us. We're so excited that you're here. And as always, we love to have you sound off in the comment section, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It's greatly appreciated. We love getting to engage with you as part of Broncos Country together. And who are your biggest X factors for this team, offense, defense, and special teams? Let us know. We'll discuss it at some point. And Cody, I think it's an exciting topic because defensively, I think just like on offense, you could go a number of different directions. There's no 2015 Von Miller on this team. There's no 2015, even, I guess you could say, like, Aqib Talib or Chris Harris Jr. or any of those guys from that vaunted defense. It's a different crew, but that doesn't mean it's any less quality. I think there's certainly some star players on this side of the ball, but who, in your opinion, is the biggest X factor on the Broncos defense?
Yeah, this is a great question because I feel like you look at every position group on this team on the defensive side of the ball, and you can make an argument for one guy being an X factor or someone that, hey, he's going to need to be a big time X factor player at that position if the Broncos want to have success. And I'm going to be a little cliche here, and it's going to tie into something I think larger in the big picture here. For me, defensively, I think the biggest X factor is Justin Simmons here. Obviously, a team captain, one of the guys who's emerged as one of the top safeties in the National Football League. Last year, he accounted for 10 total takeaways in the NFL, which led the entire league, led defensive players in that category, despite missing 5 games last season. Justin is a very, very pivotal part of this Broncos defense. And look, we saw some moments last year where, hey, if you take Justin out, like, what does it look like? Luckily, you have a really good room in place where Caden Stearns and Kareem Jackson were able to carry the mantle without him. But we saw his impact the moment he returned from injury. You're like, oh yeah, you know what? That's exactly what you get from Justin Simmons, a guy who's going to be consistent as a tackler, a guy who's going to be a ball hawk. He's going to get takeaways. He's going to give you an opportunity if you're the offensive side of the ball to maybe get in a position to score. And I think that is big for Justin Simmons. And I think you can make a huge argument here that if you look at maybe the top 2 players on the Broncos defense, it's really between Justin Simmons and Patrick Surtain as really your biggest X factors for this team. So for me, I'm going to go with that. But I mean, not only that, Sayre, and I think an X factor, you look at it from what they do on the field, right? I also like to do and take a look at maybe what they do off the field. What Justin Simmons does in the community is super important. And over the weekend, he held a camp alongside Kareem Jackson, the safety tandem there on behalf of the Justin Simmons Foundation, on behalf of the Kareem Jackson Foundation for over 220 local youth at Aurora Central High School. It was great to go out there and see experienced teammates out there like PJ Locke, Caden Stearns, Damari Mathis, and Aaron Patrick joined him for the event. It was such a great experience. But while we set the table for that, and obviously you can check out that coverage, milehighsports.com. I wrote an article on it. We did have a chance to ask Justin and Kareem about training camp, which is coming up here in just about 2 weeks' time here. And vets are going to report on the 25th, rookies on the 19th. But here's what Justin and Kareem had to say about Sean Payton and also what they're excited for about training camp.
Throw anything at me that I haven't seen. So, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. He kind of telling everybody it's going to be different. It's going to be a change. So, looking forward to it and embracing it. For us as a team, I think it'll be great for us. I think we'll need it, to have a different culture shock, to see something different. How a different ship is ran. Thus far things have been great. OTAs, minicamp was great. He doesn't skip a moment to teach, and I enjoy that. And I think the younger guys need that as well. So I think training camp would be no different. I think obviously it'll be tough as training camp. So for me, I'm looking forward to it, and I embrace every second of it.
What about you, Jay?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm excited too. I think he always is talking about the best players will play, and so it's going to be competitive, and I'm excited to compete.
He's excited to compete. And look, that's the elevation. That's the standard that Sean Payton is now setting. I mean, everybody in this locker room, from guys that I've talked to, have said, hey, we're locked in. We're excited for it. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be a good challenge because it'll tell us exactly how far we can go as a football team. And I think when you think of foundation, Justin Simmons is the epitome of what you want to build your franchise around. And when you talk about impact on the field, yeah, he's one of the team's biggest X factors. I want to get your thoughts on maybe what they had said there and also get your X factor on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I love it. I love hearing from those guys. It's cool seeing them together. We got too many Bash brothers on the Broncos. We need to like figure out a new nickname. But I love those. When I see those guys, man, I just think that they've brought us some of the best memories of a dark time in recent Broncos history, right? So super thankful to them for valuing the community, valuing young football players, or just young kids in general, man. It's awesome what they do, and awesome of them to answer questions and talk about Sean Payton, talk about best players going to play. You and I have mentioned that on this show. It's like they've got the names on the helmets, not the logos. And Sean Payton was kind of like diminishing the importance of not having the logo, but I think there's something there. And I would love to know maybe after camp is over, maybe he'll reveal what that's all about. But it speaks to what Justin Simmons said there at the end. The best players are going to play. And to what Kareem said, like training camp's going to be tough. And this roster does need that culture shock that he's talking about. And I think where that could end up coming from, not just Sean Payton, but it's going to be those key veteran players carrying that vision out, not just Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, but my two X factors. And I picked two, Cody, because I think it's got to be one of these two guys, Frank Clark or Randy Gregory, really emerging as an X factor in this defense, becoming that big time pass rusher that we've said on this show many times before. You need somebody who's going to go and close out those games. Somebody who the Broncos really struggling. What were they, 2-10 last year in one score games? Not saying that a one pass rusher is going to change that entire record, but maybe in a couple games change the outcome. You need somebody to go out there and shut things down on a late drive, late in the game. Your offense needs the ball back. You need to get another possession, or you need to maybe shut it down with the 2-minute drill. You need to have somebody that can go out there and do that. So it's got to be either one of Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, or, both guys. They've got to figure it out. So I think that's the X factor for me. Can the Broncos get a pass rusher to step up and become one of those top tier guys in big moments?
I like that you brought up too, the 2-10, the one score difference, how much does pass rush or pressure, account for maybe making a difference in that outcome? I do want to reference one game, week 3 against the San Francisco 49ers. Randy Gregory, Bradley Chubb, their pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo forced him to step out of the back of the end zone, which led to a safety, which if that never happened, Denver doesn't win that game there. So that is a great example of maybe what a pass rusher can do. And look, if Randy Gregory or Frank Clark can become an X factor for the defense at that position, it'll mean good things for this team. And they need that. They need that standard, because the outlook overall at pass rusher, minus Von Miller, minus guys like Bradley Chubb, everybody in Broncos country is waiting for one of those guys to step up and be that next guy here for that position, right? Because we think about it. I mean, even before Von Miller, right before him, who did Broncos country always have in the back of their head? It was Elvis Dumervil. And then it emerged into becoming Von Miller. And then, hey, look, you had DeMarcus Ware. And then after that, you were trying to figure out, okay, hey, Von Miller's still a guy. He had some interest. Okay, here comes Bradley Chubb. And now those guys are gone. Who is going to take the torch and run with it here for the Broncos this upcoming season at pass rusher? I agree with you, Sayre. I think those are good picks. Broncos country, we're eager for your thoughts as well. On the defensive side of the ball, who do you feel like needs to be the Broncos' biggest X factor on that side of the ball? Make sure you comment on YouTube if you're watching, if you're listening, wherever you get your podcast. You can always send us your thoughts, your feedback, your comments on social media, on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. Our conversation continues here on today's episode of the show as we now shift our focus to the special team side of the ball. A lot of questions with a new revamped idea and identity of what they want to become: a new punter, a new kicker, a new long snapper, and is there going to be a new returner? These are questions we'll throw out there, we'll answer and ask on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Bird Dogs. And Bird Dogs, their clothing is ultra comforting if you've ever worn them. I wore them over the weekend at Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson's youth football camp. And because it was in the morning, the sun was out, it allowed me to stay cool. They have cooling technology inside of their shorts or their joggers, which makes it very effective if you're an outdoor person like me. Make sure you wear sunscreen. I got torched over the weekend here. But last year, they sent me some khaki-style joggers that fit to perfection. They're perfect for lounging or shorts for the summertime. They sent me that as well. This year, they sent me 2 brand new pairs of shorts that came in with custom liners and inseams that fit me perfectly. They're perfect for working out in. You can sleep in them if you want to. You can wear them while you're taking your dog on a walk, or if you're with the kids or you're out and about. Bird Dogs has you covered, and they have various color schemes and fit options which fit better than their competitors by a mile. They're perfect for any type of weather. You can choose to add linings if you want, and you can also choose your inseam length as mentioned. So make sure you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, and they'll include a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Who will emerge as the Broncos' biggest X factor on the special team side of the ball this upcoming season? As we approach training camp, we'd like to share our thoughts, project, and maybe talk about why this player or this position needs to emerge in the forefront of that conversation. You'll get that on Locked On Broncos every single day, all year long. Just thank you so much, Broncos Country, for taking time out of your day to listen to us or to watch us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. You making us part of your everyday means the world to us. We always appreciate the interaction with everybody, including all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. So, Sayre, special teams this year, obviously a revamped identity under Sean Payton, and I think it's always been an important factor for him because for Denver, there's been such an inconsistent gap. I think 2015, to be honest with you, was probably the last year the Broncos special teams unit was great, was consistent in terms of returning, in terms of coverage. But ultimately, it's been a long time, not outside of quarterback, since the Broncos have had consistency in the special teams side of the ball. Ben Kotwika, the new special teams coordinator, Mike Westhoff overseeing and assisting with development of a lot of what they want to do, especially with their personnel on that side of the ball. So for you, who is the biggest X factor, in your opinion, this upcoming season for the Broncos on special teams?
Well, I think a lot of people are going to want to say the kicker, and I get that. I think that's a great pick, but I'm going with the punt returner, and it speaks to something that Sean Payton said earlier this offseason where he talked about the hidden yardage game in the NFL today, and where a punt returner, a good one, can really make a huge difference on the outcome of a game. And that's not just to say, remember Trendon Holiday back in the 2012 season where he was just, it felt like he was taking every other punt back for a touchdown. I'm not saying you have to have somebody like that, but what I am saying is that you need somebody that, hey, they're going to make a good decision inside the 20. Are they going to catch it? Are they going to let it go? And they're going to make good decisions consistently. They're going to catch the ball consistently. They're going to gain that 8 to 12 yards of field position that's going to take you from maybe the 25 to like the 37. And then all of a sudden your drive is starting at a much different spot. I'm not trying to heap way too much expectations on this position, but I truly believe this can be an X factor. So who is going to be the Broncos punt returner? That's a great question at this point. We'll maybe find out more at training camp, but you can speak to this more than I can, Cody, having seen a little bit at OTAs and whatnot, but I'm guessing we got, Montreal Washington still out there. They spoke very highly of Marvin Mims at the NFL draft and what he can do as a punt returner as well. Kendall Hinton did a little punt returning. I wonder if KJ Hamler is going to get into that mix as well with his big time speed. So there's options out there for the Broncos at the punt returner spot. To me, this is a huge X factor because they lost field position so badly so many times in the last handful of years. It's not just, we got to look past just Montreal Washington. As much of a godsend as Deontay Spencer was back in 2019, that unit has struggled for a while. So I think really the punt return position, to me, one of the biggest X factors on the team and certainly on special teams.
100% agree with you. And my pick for the X factor here is going to be kind of the counter of that, but it just highlighting the importance of that. Like as a returner, if you can change it to where, let's say the Broncos average starting field position, how many times did we see them start inside the 10 last year in the punt return department specifically? If you put them, let's say, even at the 25, if you can get past the 25 or you can get to the 30, you can get a big return that maybe get you closer to midfield as some other teams have benefited in the previous years against the Denver Broncos. That makes such a tremendous difference. And that can lead to, like I said, you never want to come away with just 3 points all the time. But heck, how many times did we look at it last year? Oh, if Denver was in a position to kick a field goal in this game, maybe they do win. Maybe their record in one-score games isn't 2-10. Those are the little difference makers, and that's something that, as you pointed out, Sean Payton has highlighted. I'm going to go with another side of the ball, and I know for Broncos country, they've seen too many of these punts in the last several years. You don't want your punter to be on the field all the time, but when you have your punter on the field, he needs to be a difference maker for you. So I'm going with Riley Dixon at the punter position because I think it's so important that the Broncos get back to finding consistency in the return game. I think, what was it, back in the day, Britton Colquitt was probably one of the more consistent punters the Broncos have had in recent memory. I remember they moved on from him, I think, for Riley Dixon initially, and then they moved on from Riley Dixon to Marquette King, who obviously that never worked out in Denver for some reason. He had the Colby Wadman experiment. Denver's gone through a lot of punters since the time, I would say maybe not as many quarterbacks, but just as, quite a bit of punters there. And Riley Dixon be consistent. Now, the one area where Corliss Waitman struggled with last season that really impacted Denver, there were times where he was absolutely booming the ball and good placement, right? But then sometimes one bounce would go out of bounds. It'd lead to a touchback. You don't want that to happen. Can Riley Dixon do what other teams have been doing against the Denver Broncos, and that's pinning them inside the 10-yard line, giving them that starting field position? Can the coverage unit get down there and cover effectively? So much of that is contingent upon how well Riley Dixon punts, right? You talk about hang time. You have really good hang time. It allows your gunners to get downfield and to maybe hold off a returner. If you have small hang time or you don't have very good punts consistently enough, it can impact the overall operation of what you want to do. And that leads to negative impacts and negative outcomes for the Broncos defense in terms of field position. So to me, I think it's also just as important as the return game to have your punter as your biggest X factor. And I think that is something that needs to be highlighted a little bit more. Would it be nice, Sayre, if the Broncos had some games this year where they were like the LA Rams in that Christmas Day game where they didn't have a single punt? It would be great. That would mean great things for the Broncos offense. But your punter is going to have to be on the field quite a bit at some point. Hopefully it's not under the context where Denver can't score points offensively, but there's going to be times where you're going to have to punt the football away. Can Riley Dixon become that guy? To me, that's a question I want to have answered during training camp and the preseason.
You just listing off all those names of Broncos punters, the ghosts of Broncos punter past, might have inspired a little article for me. I just got inspired to write something, Cody. It's so bizarre to me that this position is the one the Broncos can't figure out, right? Because it's like, if you're a great power hitter in baseball and you're a free agent and the Colorado Rockies are offering you $20-30 million a year to come play for them, you might do that. Why? Because you can hit a lot of home runs at Coors Field, right? The same logic applies to punting. You see these punters come into Denver from other teams, and it's like they're out there, doing a home run derby every time they're punting the ball. It's like, is this ball even going to stay in the stadium? They're kicking it so hard. For whatever the reason, the Broncos have not been able to find somebody to do that. I don't understand it. I don't understand how the Broncos punter every year does not lead the league in punting average or hang time, like you said. It's the thin mile high air. And for some reason, if it's the placebo effect, it works for these visiting punters coming in because they boom the ball and the Broncos punters simply don't. So it's a weird position they haven't been able to figure out. So I agree with you. Riley Dixon, he's a big X factor this year, not just because he can throw passes. He's got a few completions as an NFL player. I know there's been some debate over whether or not the average Joe can complete a pass. Riley Dixon's completed a few of them. I think he is a big X factor this season.
And he's a tremendous athlete as well. Watching him during OTAs and minicamp, you can see, hey, this is a guy who can, if he pieces it all together and finds that consistency that maybe he didn't have early on in his first stint with the Broncos, hey, maybe they can get it right a little bit later on down the road. That's an interesting storyline to watch. Broncos Country, let us know who you think your biggest X factors are on offense, on defense, on special teams in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, you can tweet us on Twitter. If you're listening wherever you get your podcast, at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But that will wrap up today's episode of the show. For all you everydayers out there, here's what you can expect for tomorrow's brand new episode of the Locked On Broncos podcast. We're going to take a look on offense and we're going to take a look on defense of non-starters that Broncos Country needs to keep their eye on this upcoming season. You'll get that and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode of the show.